Rainer Rilke has this poem. God won't be lived like some light morning. Whoever climbs down the shaft must give up earth's repleteness for the craft of mining. Stand hunched and pry him loose in tunnels. So this is the way we begin every new year in the church, with an account of the journey of the Magi to discover the baby Jesus born to be king, the one that even the stars themselves seem to be pointing to. When played by our children at the pageant on Christmas Eve, it's sweet and lovely, but the story itself is filled with political intrigue and the threat of violence, and it reminds me of that poem from Rilke. God won't be lived like some light morning. We want God to bring light mornings and sunshine to our lives, to offer peace to our hearts and joy to the world. But the Christmas story from the very beginning and throughout the Gospels comes to this excruciating climax on the cross and makes it very clear that God lived in flesh and blood. God in materiality is hard and heavy. It was no light morning for God, and that is because there is a heaviness to the human heart, a vulnerability to the human body, a trajectory of human love in this world that is simply and plainly difficult and painful. So there's a myriad of ways to address this reality of the painfulness of existence. We can isolate and insulate ourselves, check out of relationships and make very narrow the circles so as to minimize the risk of being hurt. We can hole ourselves up into gated communities of safety. We can numb ourselves with drugs and alcohol. We can pursue the light and easeful morning in any number of ways. And in fact, everything around us offers just that, a promise of how things, goods, products will make our lives easier and lighter and better and fixed. Here, buy this, try that, read this, post that, look like this, have one of these. It'll be better, it'll be easier and lighter. Everything around us promises that. And yet we know it is, for the most part, false. And in the end, the efforts to avoid the pain bite us. Our efforts to purchase the solution makes us less than human, can wither us on the vine of living. For God won't be lived like that. God won't be lived like some light morning. Whoever climbs down the shaft must give up earth's repleteness for the craft of mining. Stand hunched and pry him loose in tunnels. The experience of God, the way of Christ, involves a letting go of the superficial things of this life, the giving up of earth's repleteness to some extent. And to grow spiritually, to live out of that realm of the heart, necessarily will involve a journey, a certain climbing down the shaft and taking up this craft of mining. We have to mine God out of the sorrows and the sufferings of life, the messes and the mistakes, the failures and the failings, the violence and the brokenness. And as we do that, we find that God is mining us out of the cramped cave shafts of our life in turn. So this is what the Magi did. This is what their journey represented, a departing from their own nation, their own comfort zones of culture and religion, and traveling to a foreign land and risking the wrath of the authorities there. They had to be open and wise and humble enough to recognize the God-lived one when they saw him in the poverty of the baby. They took up their journey knowing that God would not be lived like some light morning. They entered into the heart of the violent and powerful Roman Empire and encountered a murderous madman of a ruler who cared not who suffered in the effort to maintain his own power. The passage ends that the Magi chose to return by another route, not to go back to Herod, after paying homage to the true king. And as the wise men departed, so too did Mary and Joseph and Jesus, as political refugees seeking asylum in another country, a country unlike Israel and unlike America. Egypt was not building walls to keep them out. This is how God came into this world, and this is how God lived. Not like some light morning, nor should we think that our journey towards being God-lived ourselves will be any different necessarily. For we'll have to pry God loose in the mine shaft of the difficulties of our own lives in this world. We'll have to journey beyond the comfortable confines of how we've organized and gained some semblance of control over our lives, giving up earth's repleteness, and consider the craft of mining. So here on the first Sunday of the new year, I ask, what does that look like to you in 2019? What is the relinquishing of the light morning that you must do to pry God loose in your life? What journey must you undertake? Maybe it's a purely internal one that requires staying put physically when the impetus is to move, is to be somewhere else. Maybe it's an external, literal journey to some person or place that you felt you've needed to go or to do for some time, to be with for some time. Maybe it's an inspiration towards an injustice in your life or in this world that you've been avoiding and needs to be addressed. Maybe it's the risk you've been unwilling to take or the dream you've been unable to pursue. There are more important things than comfort and easefulness and security and control. There's the fire of God, the star that burns white hot, that guides you to where you need to be, but also purges you and refines you and catches others on fire as well. What is the shaft that you've been unwilling to climb down because you've been reluctant to give up earth's repleteness? There are stars out there in the night sky and inside you as well that will guide you to the God-lived people in unexpected places and to the God-lived part of yourself that's likely nothing you've expected. For God won't be lived like some light morning. Whoever climbs down the shaft must give up earth's repleteness for the craft of mining, stand hunched, and pry him loose in tunnels.